Hello there, and welcome to All About Earth, where science slows its heartbeat and curiosity takes a deep breath. Wherever you are right now, I hope you're comfortable. Maybe you're tucked beneath a warm blanket or resting into a soft couch after a long day. Maybe you're lying beneath the stars, the sky breathing quietly above you. However you've arrived here, I'm glad you did. Because tonight, we're not racing through time, we're listening to it. We're listening to messages that have traveled through unimaginable ages. Messages carved not in words but in stone. Fossils, the quiet storytellers of deep time. The accidental time capsules that survived everything else. Think about that for a moment. Of all the creatures that have ever lived, over 99.9% are gone forever. Entire species, whole ecosystems, dissolved into dust, buried beneath mountains, melted into new worlds. Yet every so often, against all odds, something endures, a bone turned to mineral, a leaf's shadow pressed into shale, a ripple of skin, a shell, a footprint, frozen mid-motion, the last heartbeat of a world that should have vanished completely. That's what a fossil really is, a moment that refused to be erased. Some hold predators caught mid-strike, some preserve the faint outline of lungs or feathers or the curve of a once-living eye. Others belong to beings so ancient they lived in a world before flowers, before birds, before trees. Fossils are, in their way, the most patient witnesses that Earth has ever known. And tonight, we're going to listen to them. We won't be digging yet. That part will come later. For now, imagine simply being there, in the field, in the stillness. The sunlight low, the rock warm to the touch, the wind sliding softly through time. You brush away a little dust, and there, a shape begins to emerge. It's small, but it's something, a whisper from a world so distant that continents hadn't even chosen their places yet. Isn't that strange? The planet forgets so easily, and yet sometimes it remembers perfectly. So wherever you are, under blankets or galaxies, take a slow breath. You are part of that same record. Your heartbeat, your breath, even your bones will one day join the endless sediment of moments. The Earth writes everything down, just very, very slowly. And if you find a little wonder in that idea, I'd love for you to share it. Tap like, leave a comment, or subscribe, not for the numbers, but to help this small corner of peaceful science drift a little farther into the world. Because wonder, like fossils, deserves to be found again. So settle in. Let the clock fade. We're about to wander backward, through layers of silence, through forgotten seas, through the long mineral memory of Earth, to hear what the stones have been saying all along. Beneath the surface of the world we know, under the hum of insects, beneath the footprints of living things, there is a slower world, one that moves in silence and measures time not by days, but by epoch. It is the realm where life and death mingle, and where, on exceedingly rare occasions, death refuses to vanish. This is the story of fossilization, not merely a process, but a quiet rebellion against forgetting. Every fossil begins as something alive. A shell, a fern, a creature that once moved, breathed, and fed under a sun that may have been warmer or dimmer than our own. Its ending comes quickly, as all endings do, but what happens next determines whether it will join the infinity of things lost, or the infinitesimal few that endure. For most, the Earth's recycling is merciless. When a body falls, it is taken apart almost instantly. Bacteria begin their invisible work, unraveling the delicate bonds of tissue. Scavengers arrive, tearing, scattering. Even the smallest streams carry fragments away, grinding them to nothing. In the air, oxygen accelerates decay. In the water, currents erase what remains. The planet itself seems to whisper, forget, and almost always it does. But every so often, through a combination of timing, chemistry, and luck bordering on the miraculous, that cycle is interrupted. Death is hushed, decay is delayed, and what should have dissolved into dust is instead preserved in stone. It begins, always, with burial. A sudden event, a flood, a slide of mud, a fall of ash, seals the remains away before oxygen and organisms can finish their work. In this moment, the race against decomposition begins. The faster the burial, the greater the chance of survival. A creature covered within hours may be saved, one left in the open for days will be erased. The layers that cover it act as a shroud, not of fabric, but of sediment. Grains of sand, clay, or volcanic powder settling like the pages of a book about to be written. Down there, where light no longer reaches, oxygen runs thin. That absence, deadly to the living, becomes a guardian of the dead. Without oxygen, the tireless agents of decay, bacteria, fungi, scavengers, can no longer thrive. The body rests, its shape slowly imprinting itself into the surrounding matter. It is not yet a fossil, only a memory in waiting. Over time, the weight of new layers presses down. Water, carrying dissolved minerals, seeps through the pores and empty spaces. Where once there were cells and soft tissues, now there are hollow. These hollows fill with mineral solution, silica, calcite, iron, phosphate, depending on the chemistry of the place. Molecule by molecule, the body begins to change. This is permineralization, the first great magic of fossilization. Here, minerals replace the original organic material, not in haste, but in patience. Each tiny cavity is filled, each structure mirrored in stone. The process is so precise that even under a microscope, the pattern of cells, the fine weave of bone or wood, remains visible. The living tissue vanishes, yet its architecture survives, translated from flesh to mineral in a slow, wordless conversation between biology and geology. Sometimes, though, the replacement goes even further. The original material is not just filled, but entirely replaced, a total transformation known as mineralization. The bones or shells become something else entirely. Quartz, pyrite, or another mineral altogether. What was once living matter becomes part of the Earth's own mineral language, still recognizable in form, though now speaking with the voice of stone. Other times, the preservation takes a more delicate form. When pressure increases but temperature remains low, the body may not mineralize at all. Instead, it leaves behind a thin residue, a ghostly outline of carbon. This is carbonization, the second miracle. Under immense pressure, volatile elements are driven off. Hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, leaving behind only a fragile film of pure carbon. That dark sheen on stone, almost like ink, is the residue of something that once moved in sunlight. The finest details of wings, leaves, or skin can be etched in this way, reduced but not erased. It is as if the earth herself took a charcoal impression before time could steal the image. Yet, not all fossils are impressions or stones. Sometimes nature works in 3 dimensions, capturing life with a precision so eerie it feels like a trick. When tree resin drips and hardens, it can trap the small and delicate insects, seeds, fragments of fur or feather. Over the ages, the resin polymerizes, turning into amber, a golden glass that seals its prisoners perfectly, down to the hair, the air bubble, the last gesture. Inside those translucent prisons, time has no meaning. There is no decay, no collapse, only stillness, eternal mid-motion. Elsewhere, preservation happens through extremes. Some bodies are caught in ice, flash frozen in moments of catastrophe and locked away in glaciers. Others dry out in arid deserts, where lack of moisture halts decay. In rare cases, salt or tar acts as preservative, sealing the dead in darkness. Each of these methods, freezing, desiccation, encapsulation, is its own quiet miracle, a different way for time to hesitate. But even with all these paths, fossilization remains almost impossibly rare. The odds are brutal. Out of all the life that has ever lived, only a vanishing fraction, perhaps 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10,000, maybe less, ever becomes part of the record. The rest vanish completely, return to the cycle of decay and renewal. To exist as a fossil is to have won a lottery written in sediment and chance. Why so few? Because Earth is not kind to memories. Its crust shifts. Mountains rise and crumble. Rivers carve valleys, glaciers grind continents. Volcanoes pour new rock across old. The seafloor is swallowed into the mantle, recycled into magma over hundreds of millions of years. Almost nothing survives. Fossils are not the rule. They are the exceptions, the survivors of survivors. Even after formation, their ordeal continues. The same tectonic forces that protect them also threaten them. Rocks fold, fault, fracture. Heat and pressure metamorphose stone into new forms, erasing all trace of the creatures once preserved inside. Water dissolves. Wind exposes. Time erases. For every fossil that reaches the surface and is found by human hands, millions more are lost forever, ground into dust, melted or buried beyond reach. And yet some remain. The fossil record, incomplete as it is the greatest archive the Earth has ever kept. But calling it an archive feels too organized, too deliberate. It is more like a whispering collage. Fragments of conversations carried across eons. Each fossil tells not only of the creature itself, but of the conditions that allowed it to be spared, the flood, the mud, the chemistry, the chance alignment of sediment and silence. Think of what it takes: first, death in the right place, then immediate burial, then absence of oxygen, then a mineral bath seeping patiently through tissues, then millions of years of geological stillness, no earthquakes, no uplift, no melting, and then after all that, the final act: exposure, a shift of earth, a wind, a tide revealing what has been hidden for ages. For one instant, light touches the shape again. That moment when something once alive, long thought erased, sees daylight for the first time in millions of years, is as close to resurrection as the natural world allows. The fossil does not live, yet it breathes in another sense. It bridges life and time, proving that even in a universe built on decay, memory sometimes endures. The process of fossilization, then, is not just chemistry and geology. It is a negotiation between loss and persistence, between the inevitability of erosion and the stubbornness of form. Each fossil is a contradiction. Life frozen by death, fragility preserved by violence, memory carved by forgetting. Imagine the sheer scale of everything that has been lost, all the soft bodies, all the colors, all the gestures that left no trace. The living world is a brief spark against the background of geological eternity, and fossils are the embers that refuse to cool. Even their beauty is paradoxical. They are products of destruction, floods, ash, landslides, eruptions, yet they become symbols of endurance. The same mud that buried them also saved them. The same pressure that crushed them also immortalized them. There is something almost merciful in that exchange, that nature, so often ruthless, occasionally chooses to remember. And so, when we hold a fossil in our hands, what we touch is not simply ancient stone. It is the aftermath of a miracle, the improbable intersection of biology, chemistry, and time. It is a message written in mineral script, saying simply, I was here, I lived, I did not vanish completely. The Earth does not keep most of its stories. Volcanoes rewrite them, rivers scatter them, glaciers erase them, but fossils remain, scattered like punctuation marks in the endless text of the planet. Each one interrupts the silence, reminding us that memory can survive even under the weight of worlds. In a way, the fossilization process mirrors our own longing, our desire to leave something behind, to resist the tide of erasure. The Earth, in its rare and accidental kindness, grants that wish now and then. A bone becomes quartz, a leaf becomes carbon, a bubble of resin becomes amber light. And for a few scattered fragments of life, time stops. The rest, the other 99.9%, dissolve quietly into soil and sea, becoming the next generation of living matter, unrecorded, unnamed. The planet continues to turn, unbothered by what it forgets. But deep below, in the dark strata, those rare survivors remain, proof that even the most fleeting lives can, through an extraordinary convergence of elements, outlast the ages. Fossils are not just relics of the past. They are acts of defiance, evidence that in a world devoted to change, some things choose to stay. And as the Earth whispers forget, they whisper back, softly, endlessly. Remember, there are some fossils that do not whisper, but roar, silently, across 70 million years. They do not speak of stillness or decay, but of motion, fury, and the final heartbeat of struggle. They are the rarest kind of fossils, not the quiet remnants of life that faded away, but the eternal imprint of conflict. A predator and its prey locked together in their last instant, caught mid-motion, mid-breath, mid-attack. Among them, one stands above all others. A fossil unearthed in the wind-blown deserts of Mongolia, where dunes drift like slow waves and time itself seems to rest beneath the sand. There, in a layer of ancient rock, once part of a shifting dune field, two creatures were found entangled, their bones entwined like dancers interrupted. One, the hunter, Velociraptor, swift-footed, blade-clawed, every line of its skeleton built for pursuit. The other, the hunted Protoceratops, a horned herbivore, smaller than its later relatives but strong, with a solid frill of bone and jaws that could crush bone or root. They met 74 million years ago, and the Earth, as if unwilling to lose the story, chose that instant to remember. We cannot see the sandstorm itself, but its echoes are written in their pose. The Velociraptor's curved sickle claw, sharp as a scythe, is driven deep into the neck of the Protoceratops. Its arm bones are bent at impossible angles, locked around the frill, its ribs flared with exertion. The Protoceratops, in turn, has sunk its beak into the predator's arm, its bite preserved even as muscle and flesh have long vanished. Their bodies are pressed together, twisted in opposition, life against life, force against force, and then stillness. That stillness did not come gently. It came in a rush of sand, perhaps from a collapsing dune or a sudden storm. The air thickened, vision disappeared, and within moments the two combatants were swallowed. The sand poured over them, fine as dust, sealing the scene before scavengers or decay could touch it. Oxygen vanished, silence fell, and the earth whispered, "Free," and they did. Millions of years later, their struggle still holds its shape. Talon against bone, jaw against arm, as if time itself had paused mid-motion, unwilling to interrupt the story's climax. It is, in the truest sense, a photograph made of stone. To a paleontologist, it is not just a fossil. It is a revelation, a record of behavior, not anatomy, of action, not just existence. Most fossils tell us what a creature was. This one tells us what it did. From the bones alone, one can reconstruct the choreography of the fight. The Velociraptor was built for speed, its body light and balanced, its long tail acting as a stabilizer during rapid turns. It hunted with agility, relying on its large, recurved claw, a curved, sickle-like talon on the second toe, to slash or grip its prey. The Protoceratops, by contrast, was a plant-eater, heavy-set, compact and muscular. Its frilled skull, though smaller than that of later ceratopsians, was a fortress of bone. Its beak, sharp and crushing, could tear through roots or flesh if cornered. What happened between them was more than chance. The Velociraptor likely attacked from the side or above, leaping with outstretched claws to drive its weapon into the soft tissue of the neck or belly. The Protoceratops reacted, twisting, biting back, clamping down with a force that broke bones. The predator may have been small, barely the size of a turkey, but it was precise, relentless. The prey was not passive. It fought with desperation, its heavy limbs pushing, its beak crushing. And then, in the middle of that violent ballet, the earth intervened. Perhaps a dune collapsed, a wall of sand triggered by wind or quake. Perhaps a sudden storm swept across the plain, the air thick with dust, the visibility gone. Within seconds, the world became suffocating white noise. Sand surged like liquid, pouring into nostrils, lungs, and open mouths. There was no time to escape, no warning. The fight ended not with victory or defeat, but burial. The miracle is not just that they died together. It is that they remained exactly as they were in that instant. The sand that entombed them became their canvas. Grain by grain, it hardened into sandstone, locking every curve of bone, every angle of struggle into permanence. Over time, minerals seeped in, replacing tissue with stone, preserving the shape of a claw embedded in flesh, a jaw still clenched, even after the bodies themselves were long gone. The gesture of the moment endured. To find such a fossil is like finding thunder trapped in amber. It defies the normal rhythm of decay. It freezes motion, emotion, the raw mechanics of survival. And for scientists, it offers something even rarer, a direct window into behavior. Behavior is the ghost of biology. Skeletons tell us structure, muscles tell us movement, but behavior, the instant decisions of fear, hunger, and reflex, usually vanishes with the living. Yet here, It remains. We can see strategy written in bone, the hunter's leap, the prey's counter, the desperate symmetry of combat. This fossil turns theory into evidence, proof that velociraptors were active predators, not scavengers, capable of grappling prey nearly their own size. The posture itself is a lesson in physics and instinct. The velociraptor's body arcs forward, talon lifted, not slashing wildly but hooked, driving inward with force and precision. Its forelimbs, once feathered, were pressed against its opponent, perhaps to stabilize the strike. Its jaws are open, teeth angled for a bite. Every muscle, every motion is captured at the apex of effort. The Protoceratops, though smaller and stockier, gives nothing away. Its hind legs are braced, its tail stiffened. The frill that once shielded its neck is now a laver, used to push, twist, resist. Its bite clings to the predator's arm, even in death refusing to release. Together they form a circle of motion, predator and prey locked in a geometry of survival. And yet, there is poetry here too. The fossil is not merely a record of violence, but of equality. Predator and prey, aggressor and defender, are frozen in the same instant, the same fate. The hunter did not triumph. The hunted did not escape. The desert claimed them both. In that sense, this fossil tells a deeper story, not of victory but of balance. In nature, even the most skillful predator is never far from danger. To hunt is to risk being hunted by circumstance itself, by weather, by chance, by the indifferent weight of time. The sandstorm that killed them was not cruel, it was simply present. The earth does not choose sides. It records everything, and in its recording, it equalizes. Scientists studying the fossil have traced the contours of each bone, measured the force of bites, reconstructed muscle attachment points, and run simulations of the strike. From these data emerge images of speed, movement so quick that even imagining them in real time is dizzying. The velociraptor's leg could have driven its claw downward with a force greater than its own body weight. The Protoceratops' beak could shear through bone. These were not slow creatures lumbering through prehistory. They were athletes of survival, each refined by millions of years of evolution to excel at a single brutal purpose. And yet, all that speed, all that evolution ended in stillness. A stillness more perfect than any victory. When paleontologists unearthed the pair, they found them just as the sand had left them, bones interlocked, the curve of one spine pressed against another. Around them the grains of stone still held the delicate impressions of skin and muscle long gone. It must have been a moment of awe to brush away the last layer of dust and realize that what lay beneath was not a skeleton, but a story. The desert wind moves differently around such a discovery. You can almost feel the echo of the struggle. The rhythm of movement suddenly stopped. The dunes whisper, and the bones seem to answer. For the scientists who study it, this fossil is a key to understanding not only these two creatures, but the world they lived in. It shows that the deserts of ancient Mongolia were not barren wastelands, but living arenas of predation, with storms capable of sculpting both death and memory. It shows that behavior can, against all odds, become part of the geological record. And it shows that even in the deep past, life was as vivid, as violent, and as immediate as it is today. But beyond the science, there's a strange intimacy to it. Two beings locked together for eternity, their final act recorded in perfect detail. The fossil does not exaggerate, does not dramatize. It simply is. The hunter's claw is still where it struck. The prey's beak is still where it bit. The tension between them has outlasted continents, oceans, and ages. In that sense, it is almost cinematic, a freeze frame of life's most ancient narrative. Predator and prey, action and reaction, energy and stillness. But unlike film, there is no next frame. The story ends here, sealed forever in sandstone. It reminds us that time, for all its power, occasionally hesitates, that the planet, for reasons beyond our knowing, sometimes decides that a single instant is worth keeping. The sandstorm that buried them was an act of destruction, yes, but also of preservation. Without it, their struggle would have been lost to wind and scavenger. Because of it, we can still see their final breath, their last heartbeat turned to stone. And perhaps that is the real miracle. that violence and grace can coexist in one fossil, that death can illuminate life, that the earth, in all its indifferent motion, sometimes pauses long enough to remember. If you could stand beside them now, in the museum light, you might feel it, the echo of motion trapped in stillness. The velociraptor's claw is still curved, the protoceratops's bite still locked. 74 million years have passed, but the moment remains. The earth said, "Stop," and they obeyed. Now they rest, hunter and hunted, forever entwined, a testament not only to the ferocity of life, but to its fragility and to the strange, selective memory of the world itself. In a universe where nearly everything is lost, this single heartbeat remains, a moment frozen in sand, a story that refused to die. There are moments in nature so delicate that they seem designed to vanish. A raindrop forming on a leaf, a heartbeat that hasn't yet met the air, the faint curl of life before it begins. These are not things meant to last, and yet sometimes impossibly they do. Beneath the soft weight of ancient sand, somewhere in what is now Montana, a nest once lay quiet. Within it rested a cluster of eggs, their shells thin and porous, their contents alive with potential. Inside one, a tiny being was curled in perfect symmetry, spine arched, limbs folded inward, waiting for a signal that would never come. That creature, a Hippocrosaurus, one of the great duck-billed dinosaurs of the late Cretaceous, never took its first breath, and yet, 75 million years later, its stillness speaks louder than any roar. We imagine dinosaurs as creatures of movement and power, stampeding herds, flashing teeth, thunderous steps across plains long vanished. But here in this fossil there is none of that. No violence, no chase, no triumph. Only patience, the quiet geometry of life paused mid-beginning. The embryo lies curled within the fragile oval of its egg, its head tucked gently toward its tail, as if listening to something faint and far away. Its bones, thinner than reeds, are arranged in patterns that echo the rules of growth, written into every vertebrate body. The spine curves, the limbs bend. Tiny ribs arc outward like whispers of breath. This is not the fossil of a death we can imagine. It is the fossil of a breath that never arrived. The miracle begins, as all fossil miracles do, with chance. A nest, perhaps hidden among reeds or sandbanks, was caught in a storm. The wind rose, the rain thickened into mud, or perhaps a flood swept over the lowlands. Whatever the cause, the eggs were buried quickly. The parent, if nearby, might have tried to protect them, wings or limbs shielding the nest for a moment before retreating. Then came silence. The sediment hardened, the world changed, and the unborn were sealed away, safe from decay, but removed from time. For millions of years, the embryo slept in darkness. The delicate tissues vanished, replaced molecule by molecule with minerals. The bones, once soft and pliable, turned to stone but never lost their grace. Even the curled pose survived, a posture familiar to any modern observer who has seen a chick within its shell, a universal rhythm of embryonic life shared across eons. When paleontologists uncovered the fossil, they did not find a skeleton in the traditional sense. They found a promise. Within the rock lay the image of potential, of life halted at the border between before and after. The shell had long since fused with the surrounding matrix, but inside, the outline of the embryo was unmistakable. Its skull, small and elegant, with an elongated snout and eye sockets wide and expectant. Its limbs, short but proportioned for what they would one day become. The sturdy legs of a grazer, the long tail of a balanced runner. Each bone, though smaller than a matchstick, was positioned with exquisite care by the slow hand of time. Science approached it with reverence. To study an embryo is to glimpse evolution at its most intimate, the very moment where inheritance becomes individuality. The Hippocrosaurus embryo revealed much. Its bones showed evidence of growth plates, zones where new tissue had once been forming rapidly. The skull shape hinted at the early development of the crest that would later give adult Hippocrosaurus its distinct profile. Even the arrangement of the vertebrae suggested that this species, like modern birds, curled tightly before hatching. a posture that may have helped it strengthen the muscles used to break free from the egg. The discovery didn't just show anatomy, it whispered of behavior. Dinosaurs, for all their grandeur, were living creatures that bred, protected, and raised their young. The fossilized nest hinted at communal care. The eggs were arranged deliberately, not scattered, suggesting the adult had built the nest with intention, perhaps returning to the same site season after season. Some embryos from similar finds showed different stages of development, which may mean the eggs hatched in sequence. A pattern seen in certain birds today. It suggests patience, rhythm, nurture, qualities we rarely associate with creatures that fill our imaginations with thunder. The embryo's preservation also carried a scientific surprise. Chemical traces within the fossil hinted at remnants of the organic material that once formed bone, collagen, proteins, even tiny fragments of the eggshell matrix. Under microscopes, scientists could see structures that once transported calcium to the growing bones, frozen in place mid-task. The shell itself, though mineralized, retained microscopic pores, evidence that gases once flowed in and out, exchanging breath between the egg and the world outside. Through these details, we can almost imagine it. The faint movement inside the shell, the flutter of embryonic lungs beginning to form, the steady pulse of life readying itself for air. And yet, that moment never came. Something interrupted it. Perhaps the storm, perhaps the flood, perhaps in some gentle irony, the very event that killed the embryo was the one that saved it, encasing it before decay could begin. In death, it achieved the impossible, immortality. When you look at such a fossil, the feeling it evokes is not simply curiosity, but quiet awe. There is something haunting about a being that never lived, and yet has outlasted everything. It is a fossil not of what was, but of what might have been, a silent echo of potential, preserved long after its time had passed. It also challenges our understanding of time itself. The embryo is at once ancient and newborn, 75 million years old, yet perpetually waiting to hatch. Time for it never moved forward. The sand that buried it became its sky, the minerals that replaced it became its bones, and so it remains, infinitely patient, a perfect contradiction, both unborn and eternal. For paleontologists, fossils like this are more than discoveries. They are dialogues with the earth. They tell us how dinosaurs reproduced, how they grew, how they nested, but they also invite questions beyond data, questions of tenderness, of continuity, of what it means for life to prepare itself in secret, only to be silenced before it begins. In the case of Hapacrosaurus, the findings expanded our vision of dinosaur parenthood. The structure of the nest and the growth rate of the embryos suggested these animals laid their eggs in open, ventilated mounds, perhaps covered in vegetation that generated heat as it decomposed, much like crocodiles do today. The embryo's advanced state of development indicated that the species may have exhibited precocial behavior, the hatchlings emerging ready to move, feed, and follow. This implied a world of social interaction, of learning, of care. The unborn fossil thus becomes a window not just into anatomy but into behavior, into the rhythm of life before the first breath. Yet, despite all this knowledge, what lingers most is not the data, but the emotion. The fossil feels fragile, even when encased in rock. The idea of something so small, so expectant, enduring across tens of millions of years, touches something universal, a reminder that beginnings too can become memories. The embryo, curled in eternal sleep, embodies a truth we rarely admit, that not every story begins, and yet every one leaves its mark. The earth itself seems complicit in this act of preservation. In the same way it buries trees to make coal, shells to make limestone, it buried this embryo to make memory. The sediments that sealed the egg acted like a mother's embrace, protective, unyielding, and final. The minerals that replaced its bones became the language through which it would one day speak. If you were to hold that fossil today, your fingers would trace a surface smoother than porcelain. You would not see muscle or skin, only the faint curvature where the shell once lay, the ghostly outline of bones within. But if you look long enough, you might imagine it stirring, might hear the whisper of movement in stone. The embryo seems poised, as if it might at any moment unfurl and step into a world it never knew. That illusion, that tension between motion and stillness, is what gives such fossils their strange power. They do not just record biology, they preserve emotion. Within that tiny frame is the whole drama of existence: anticipation, interruption, transformation. The embryo was denied life, yet gifted endurance. It did not breathe, but it taught us to imagine breath in stone. And what then is fossilization but a kind of mercy? A final gesture from the earth saying, "Sleep and be remembered." For scientists, studying such fossils is an act of translation, decoding not only the structure of ancient life, but the rhythms of the planet itself. Every preserved embryo is a message about climate, chemistry, and evolution. The mineral composition tells of groundwater rich in iron or silica. The surrounding sediments tell of ancient floods, shifting dunes, vanished forests. Even the cracks in the shell can reveal how quickly burial occurred. To the trained eye, the fossil is not a still image, but a narrative, a sequence of causes and consequences, written in the slow script of geology. But beyond the science, there is poetry. The idea that something as fleeting as an embryo could endure for 75 million years is almost too tender to comprehend. It is a reminder that the earth is both destroyer and archivist, erasing and preserving in equal measure. The fossil of the Hypacrosaurus embryo is, in its essence, a paradox. It represents death before life, yet also continuity beyond death. It is the pause between inhale and exhale, stretched across cosmic time. The creature inside the egg never saw the sun, never took a step, never knew the touch of air, yet its image outlasted mountains, seas, even species. When we look at it, we see not tragedy, but patience, not loss, but endurance. The embryo has become a symbol of stillness that transcends motion, a reminder that life's story is not measured by how long it moves, but by how deeply it lingers. If you listen closely, not with ears, but with the mind's quiet, you might almost hear it, the faint rhythm of a heart that never beat, echoing through stone. The earth holds that silence tenderly. The sands that buried it whisper the same message over and over. Rest now, the world will remember for you. And so it sleeps still, the unborn child of a vanished world, curled in its mineral cradle, dreaming a dream older than memory, untouched by time. It waits not to hatch, but simply to exist, to remind us that even in the stillness of stone, there is life's last breath, soft, invisible, and endless. Long before the first flower ever opened to the sun, before birds wrote music in the sky or forests rustled with leaves, the earth belonged to the sea. It was an ocean world, alien, greenish, full of chemical haze and silence. There were no petals, no feathers, no familiar shapes of life as we know it. The continents were barren, colorless rock, but beneath the waves, something extraordinary stirred. On the seafloor, among mats of microbial life and clouds of drifting sediment, creatures crept, burrowed, hunted, and molted, ancient pioneers wearing armor of stone. Among them, one ruled with quiet grace, the trilobite. It is a name that sounds simple, almost mechanical, three-lobed, for the three ridges that run lengthwise across its body, but the creature itself was anything but simple. Imagine something between a beetle and a horseshoe crab, a living jewel gliding along the seabed 500 million years ago. Its body was divided like a poem, head, thorax, tail, each part repeating the rhythm of survival. And though its shell was rigid, its movements were supple. Beneath the armor, dozens of soft legs paddled in synchronized motion, brushing against the current with feathery grace. The trilobite was one of the first animals to truly see. In a world where most life still sensed the environment through touch or chemistry, the trilobite's eyes were miracles. Twin clusters of tiny lenses, each one made not of flesh but of crystal. They were composed of calcite, the same mineral found in limestone and shells, carved by evolution into perfect optical instruments. Each lens bent light precisely, directing it into photoreceptive cells. Together, hundreds of these lenses formed compound eyes, like the mosaics of dragonflies, millions of years later. And so, in those silent seas of the Cambrian period, some 508 million years ago, the trilobite opened its crystalline eyes and looked upon the earth. What it saw was not the world we know, not blue skies or green forests, but a realm of drifting particles and soft-bodied neighbors, a slow-motion ballet of ancient life. The ocean floor was covered in strange textures, sponges like tiny chimneys, worm-like creatures twisting through sand, gelatinous swimmers gliding overhead. The trilobite's eyes caught every glint of movement, every shadow that might mean food or danger. Through those mineral lenses, the world shimmered, a liquid cathedral of light and plankton. The species known as Olinoides, found in the Burgess Shale of British Columbia, is one of the finest examples of this lost lineage. Its fossils reveal not only its armored shell, but the soft details that rarely survive time. The delicate antennae that swept the seabed, the tender limbs that carried it forward, the fine fringes used for breathing underwater. It was both ancient and advanced, a creature that seemed to know how to live in a world still figuring out what life meant. Each segment of its body was articulated like clockwork, allowing it to roll into a ball for protection, much as a pill bug does today. Evolution had already begun to experiment with complexity, and the trilobite was one of its masterpieces, an early explorer in the art of design. Its exoskeleton was both armor and memory, recording its growth through a lifetime of molts. Each time it shed its old shell, it left behind a ghost of itself, an echo in sediment, a trace of time's passage. To imagine a trilobite is to imagine movement. It did not rush, it glided. It felt its way across the seabed, its legs moving in subtle waves, its antennae reading the currents. It lived by touch, by vibration, by the shimmer of light through the water. Its body spoke a language of balance, hard shell, soft flesh, ancient instinct. And yet, despite all that grace, the trilobite's world was not gentle. The Cambrian seas were full of mouths and claws, of sudden teeth and suction. Evolution, newly awakened, was in a frenzy of invention. Every creature was trying something new: armor, eyes, spines, speed. It was an age of biological improvisation, and the trilobite was both participant and survivor. Its shell protected it, its legs let it burrow. Some species grew spines, like chandeliers. Others flattened themselves to slip beneath the sand. Some developed elaborate ridges to confuse predators or strengthen their armor. For over 270 million years, trilobites adapted, diversified, and endured. They survived shifting oceans, volcanic winters, mass extinctions. They colonized every corner of the ancient seas, from shallow reefs to deep abyssal plains. There were thousands of species, some no bigger than a grain of rice, others as long as a cat. They were not rare curiosities. They were a dynasty. The trilobites ruled the oceans longer than mammals have walked the land. And yet, today, they are gone. All that remains are the fossils, the stony impressions of shells, the faint outlines of legs, the ghostly hint of a once-living eye. The Burgess Shale preserves some of them in astonishing detail, revealing what was once unimaginable. The soft tissues, the gills, the segmented limbs. In those rocks we can see the fine hairs that brushed against water currents, the folds of muscle that bent their bodies, the faint trace of pigment once coloring their armor. Time somehow became an artist. To hold a trilobite fossil is to hold a heartbeat from before flowers, before vertebrates, before anything on land had yet moved. It is to cradle the memory of a world where light first learned how to meet an eye. The eyes of trilobites remain among the most studied structures in all of paleontology. They tell us not only about the creatures themselves, but about the physics of ancient light, how it passed through seawater, how it refracted through calcite, how evolution solved the problem of sight long before mammals or even fish existed. Some trilobites had eyes that could see both near and far simultaneously, using double lenses like telescopes. Others had panoramic vision, scanning 360 degrees around their bodies. The very principles of optics, focus, depth, clarity, were being explored by nature's hand 500 million years ago, written in crystal instead of glass. When scientists peer into those eyes today, under microscopes that magnify each lens to the scale of molecules, they find perfection. The arrangement of the lenses followed geometric laws that would not be rediscovered until modern mathematics. The angles, the refraction, all optimized by natural selection. The trilobite was not guessing, It was designed by survival's relentless patience. Its eyes were blueprints of perception itself. There is something humbling about that the first true eyes did not belong to poets or painters or thinkers, but to armored wanderers crawling through primeval mud. The trilobite's gaze, unblinking and mineral, was the first to take in the dance of sunlight across water, the first to witness the shapes of other beings. Before flowers learned to open, before birds learned to sing, the trilobites, and perhaps that is why it continues to fascinate us. Its fossils are more than relics. They are records of attention, the earliest act of looking. When we study them, we are, in a sense, meeting the first creature that could see the world as something external, something full of color and form. The trilobite was not just living in its environment, it was perceiving it. Over time, its lineage diversified wildly. Some species developed stalked eyes that rose from their heads like periscopes, scanning the currents for predators. Others lost their eyes entirely, adapting to the darkness of deep water. The story of trilobite vision became a map of evolution's endless flexibility, the same blueprint modified, discarded, reimagined across ages. But always, the pattern of the compound eye remained, a mosaic of sight, 1,000 windows into an ancient sea. To look at a trilobite fossil under light is to feel the echo of that gaze. The lenses, though dulled by age, still scatter reflections. In that faint shimmer, there is the ghost of sunlight from a Cambrian morning, bending through waves onto armored skin. The trilobite is gone, but its way of seeing remains with us, woven into the ancestry of eyes everywhere, in fish, in birds, in you. Scientists still study how those crystalline lenses worked. The trilobite's eyes are fossils of function as much as form, evidence of natural engineering that surpasses our expectations. They reveal how early life turned minerals into biology, how stone itself became part of sight. Each tiny crystal lens was perfectly oriented, its optical axis aligned with mathematical precision. The more we study them, the more we realize that evolution was already fluent in geometry before mathematics existed as a word. But beyond their complexity lies their beauty. The trilobite, with its gently curving shell and rows of lenses, was not just an organism, it was an ornament of time. Its patterns repeat in fractal rhythms, its symmetry a quiet hymn to balance. If you could see one alive, its shell would shimmer in subtle blues and browns, its compound eyes glinting like jewels beneath the waves. The world it inhabited was young, experimental, unstable. The oxygen levels were rising, continents were drifting, and new life was proliferating in every direction. The Cambrian Ocean was a theatre of firsts, the first predators, the first shells, the first nervous systems complex enough to dream. The trilobite moved through that newborn world like a witness. It survived by seeing, by reading light and shadow, by interpreting the silent grammar of motion. And then, when its time was done, the ocean folded over it. Sediment gathered, layer upon layer, until the soft shimmer of its world was replaced by silence and weight. Its shell dissolved, then reformed as stone. Its eyes, once mirrors of light, became mirrors of memory. Today, when we find them in cliffs, in quarries, in riverbeds, we are not just discovering fossils. We are rediscovering our own origins of perception. Every eye that opens on this planet carries in some buried way the legacy of that first mineral gaze. The trilobite looked, and the world looked back, and that exchange has never ended. The trilobite's time was a world before color, before petals, before birdsong, yet it lived with elegance. It saw beauty before beauty had a name. Its existence reminds us that sight came first, long before imagination, long before wonder, and perhaps, in the glimmer of those ancient eyes, the universe first saw itself reflected. So if you ever hold one, a small stony imprint of an ancient sea creature, pause for a moment, turn it in your hand, and watch how light plays across its ridges. Imagine the ocean, green and endless. Imagine a creature crawling, sensing, seeing for the very first time. No flowers, no wings, only water and light and a pair of crystal eyes. And somewhere in the silence of stone, the earth whispers, "Look," in a forest that no longer exists, on a continent that was once a different shape, A drop of resin began to fall. It oozed from a wound in the bark of an ancient tree, thick and golden, the slow heartbeat of the forest itself. It dripped downward, sticky as honey, glinting in the green light, and as it fell, it caught a fragment of life, a small beetle perhaps, or the whisper of a feather, or the shimmer of a spider's web. And in that instant, the story began. That drop hardened, sunlight warmed it, rain cooled it, and layer upon layer of resin gathered, sealing the tiny creature inside. What was once soft and transient became, through time and pressure, something imperishable. Amber. 99 million years later, in what is now Myanmar, we hold that droplet in our hands. We turn it over in the light, and the forest glows again, not in imagination but in truth. There, suspended in gold, is a moment that never ended. Amber is not just a fossil, it is a time capsule of light. While bones turn to stone and shells to shadow, amber preserves life as it was, in color, in texture, in 3 dimensions. The transparency is startling. Inside, a beetle's wings are still iridescent. A spider's silk still arcs between its legs. A feather's barbs still catch the light. The level of detail defies reason. You can see the tiny hairs on an insect's leg, the curve of its antennae, even the air bubbles that surrounded it in its final breath. In the world of fossils, amber is a magician. It doesn't flatten or compress. It doesn't turn living things into rock. It freezes them whole, mid-gesture, mid-flight, mid-thought. A fly caught in amber still looks as if it might buzz away if only you would let it. Imagine the scene 99 million years ago. The forest hums with sound. Not birdsong, they were still perfecting that art, but the buzzing of insects, the click of beetles, the rustle of ferns. Trees towered overhead, their bark thick with resin that oozed from cracks and wounds. The air was warm, rich with the scent of pine and decay. A beetle lands, explores the sticky surface, and suddenly trapped, a slow sinking. The more it struggles, the deeper it goes. Within moments, its tiny legs are sealed, its wings folded, its antennae frozen mid-signal. Nearby, a spider ventures too close, or a small piece of feather drifts down from a dinosaur's flank. The resin accepts them all without hesitation, folding them gently into its glowing embrace. Nature's most patient sculptor goes to work, not carving but enclosing. And as the resin hardens, time begins to thicken too. Years become centuries, centuries become epochs. The forest falls, the trees decay, the resin is buried, pressed and warmed until it transforms into amber. In that transformation, the world outside changes beyond recognition. Continents drift, oceans rise and fall, species appear and vanish, yet the creatures within remain unchanged, sleeping inside their golden cocoon as if the sun still filters through the same branches above. Amber is nature's way of saying, hold that thought. Scientists call it fossilized tree resin, but the phrase feels too plain for something that glows like captured sunlight. When you hold a piece of amber up to the light, it seems to breathe. It catches warmth from your fingers, and the creatures inside it look back, not with eyes that move, but with the uncanny realism of perfect preservation. They are not ghosts, but guests from another age, still waiting for the resin to melt and the forest to return. In the Burmese amber deposits, some pieces hold entire worlds, a beetle frozen mid-crawl, a spider tangled in its own web, a droplet of dew that never fell. One even contains a feather, soft and barbed, from a dinosaur that likely shook itself in the canopy above before disappearing into the deep green air. That feather is still there, its filaments intact, its microscopic structure preserved so perfectly that scientists can see the pigment granules that once gave it color. Under certain light, it still glows faintly, a flash of brown or gold as if remembering the sun. Color, that most ephemeral quality, is one of amber's rare gifts. Because it seals life so completely, it sometimes preserves the actual microscopic structures responsible for color. Tiny ridges, pigments, and reflective patterns that tell scientists what shade the creature once wore. Beetles that shimmered metallic green, flies with ruby red eyes, wasps striped in amber and black, all of it locked in the same glowing medium. Even now, after almost 100 million years, they still look alive. It's humbling to think that some of these creatures may have been the ancestors of insects still buzzing in our gardens today. The beetle caught in amber could be the great-great-grandfather, multiplied by tens of millions of generations, of the one that lands on your window. The patterns of its wings, the angle of its legs, the shape of its eyes, all familiar, all ancient. Amber doesn't just preserve form, it preserves continuity. But make no mistake, amber is choosy. Not everything gets in. It requires just the right combination of luck and timing. Resin flowing at the perfect moment, the right temperature to harden, the right burial conditions to avoid decay. A creature caught at the wrong time might decay, or simply fall away, but the lucky ones, the unfortunate lucky ones, are sealed completely, isolated from oxygen, from bacteria, from time. They are embalmed not by design, but by accident, and in that accident lies immortality. Under the microscope, these trapped creatures tell stories that bone fossils never could. You can see their muscles, their eyes, their internal organs. Sometimes you can even tell what they were doing. A fly with pollen on its legs suggests pollination. A lizard mid-shed, a spider mid-hunt, a mating pair of insects forever entwined. The humor of it is undeniable. The universe catching life in its most ordinary acts and turning them into eternal art. And then there's the irony. Resin, meant to protect a tree from harm, ends up preserving the lives that accidentally encounter it. What began as a plant's immune response, a kind of sticky shield against insects, becomes a time machine for those same insects. The hunter becomes the archive. If you could walk through that ancient forest now, you'd see resin dripping like tears down every trunk, pooling at the roots, catching sunlight as it fell. You'd smell the sharp sweetness in the air, and beneath your feet, invisible under layers of time, billions of small moments would already be sealed away, waiting for someone, someday, to find them. When scientists study amber, they use it as both a microscope and a mirror. It shows them not only what life looked like, but how it behaved. A fly's position tells us how it struggled. The distribution of air bubbles shows how fast the resin hardened. Even the layers of flow lines within amber, the tiny ripples, reveal the rhythm of that forest's heart. Amber even preserves the air itself. Trapped inside are bubbles containing samples of the ancient atmosphere, tiny spheres of breath from a time when oxygen and carbon dioxide danced in different proportions. To pierce one is to touch the air of the Cretaceous, to breathe for a fleeting moment the same sky that once shimmered over dinosaurs and dragonflies. And yet, despite its scientific value, amber has always carried something mythic about it. People have treasured it for thousands of years, not just for its beauty, but for its strangeness. It feels alive, as if holding light in its heart. The Greeks called it electron, from which we get the word electricity, because when rubbed, it gathers a static charge that makes it attract bits of straw. Even in ancient times, people sensed that amber had energy, that it was more than stone, it was bottled sunlight. There's something gently humorous in that too. The beetle trapped forever in resin has become a pendant. The spider, mid-step, now dangles from a necklace. The feather that once helped a dinosaur soar through trees now catches light on someone's wrist. Time, it seems, has a sense of irony. Yet for all its golden warmth, amber is also fragile. It can crack, burn, dissolve. It is not indestructible, only improbably preserved. A single careless touch, a sudden change in humidity, and the ancient world within can fracture. Perhaps that's fitting. Even the immortal, it seems, requires gentleness. Scientists approach these pieces with reverence. Under ultraviolet light, the resin glows with eerie blues and greens, revealing flow patterns invisible to the naked eye. Each layer tells a part of the story: how fast the resin hardened, how many times it dripped, how the forest's wounds healed over. In some samples, multiple flows trapped life at different moments. A beetle from one year, a fly from another, stacked like time's own scrapbook. And sometimes inside you find something unexpected. A single grain of pollen, a seed, a fragment of moss. A whole miniature ecosystem locked within a marble of gold. To peer into it is to look through the window of time and see not just creatures, but context, the ecology of a vanished forest preserved in exquisite, impossible detail. Amber reminds us that nature has always had a flair for drama. It doesn't just record life, it records moments. A sneeze, a stumble, a struggle, a stretch and click. Eternity. The Earth presses pause, and 99 million years later, we're still watching the same scene. So when you look at a piece of amber, think of that. Think of the beetle still shining in its private sun, the spider still caught in its own invention, the tiny feather still dreaming of flight. Think of resin dripping from the bark of an ancient tree, unaware that it's creating the world's first 3D photograph. Amber is the Earth's sense of humor made visible. Sticky, brilliant, and unexpectedly profound. It teaches us that even accidents can become art, and that sometimes to be remembered forever, all you need is bad timing and good sap. But beneath the laughter, there's wonder, because amber is also a kind of love letter, from the past to the present. It says this mattered. The world thought so much of that beetle, that feather, that spider's patient trap, that it preserved them in sunlight so we would one day see. And when you hold it, that drop of resin turned to stone, you hold not just a fragment of history, but a living illusion, a memory with depth, with color, with air still trapped inside, a moment that never learned how to end. A beetle, a spider, a feather, caught mid-life, mid-motion, and the earth whispering softly, "Keep still," and they did, forever. 68 million years ago, in what is now the rolling land of Montana, a predator walked the earth whose very name hums with myth. Tyrannosaurus rex, the king of tyrant lizards. The air was warm, thick with scent and sound. Ferns brushed the ground, and dragonflies the size of a hand glittered over sluggish rivers. The great hunter moved through this living world with the slow confidence of supremacy, each footstep sinking deep into the mud of the Cretaceous. Muscles rippled beneath scales, blood flowed hot through veins. The heart, immense and tireless, beat a rhythm that once echoed through entire valleys, and then silence. The reign of the dinosaurs ended, as all reigns do, not in a single moment, but in a cascade of endings. Ash darkened the sky, plants withered, oceans churned, and one by one, the giants fell. Time buried their bones beneath rivers and stone, pressing the pulse of life into stillness. For millions of years, that was how we imagined them. Skeletons, echoes, shadows in rock. We thought we knew the limits of what could survive. But then, a whisper came from within the stone. In the early 2000s, deep inside the fossilized femur of a Tyrannosaurus rex discovered in Montana, something impossible was found. Fragments not of bone, but of tissue. Within the hollow spaces of that ancient leg, scientists uncovered traces of blood vessels, collagen fibers, and soft tissue, material not turned entirely to mineral, but preserved in a kind of suspended decay. It was as though the earth had paused its erasure mid-sentence. The world of paleontology trembled, because this wasn't supposed to happen. For centuries we had believed that only the hardest parts of organisms could survive fossilization: bone, shell, tooth. The durable skeleton of form, flesh, blood, and connective tissue were thought to vanish within thousands of years, consumed by microbes and chemistry. Yet here, in stone older than humanity itself, were microscopic remnants of life. Under the microscope, the vessels still coiled like threads, flexible when rehydrated, ghostly pink in color. Within them, scientists found tiny structures resembling red blood cells, their shapes hauntingly familiar. It was as though the dinosaur had not completely died, as if across 68 million years, a faint echo of its heartbeat still pulsed through stone. The fossil, later nicknamed B-Rex, became one of the most extraordinary discoveries in the history of science. Not because it brought dinosaurs closer to us in imagination, but because it brought them closer to us in biology. For the first time, we could peer not just at the shape of a creature long extinct, but at its very molecules. Collagen, the tough rope-like protein that gives structure to skin, tendons, and bone, was extracted and analyzed. Its molecular sequence showed astonishing similarities to that of birds, confirming with chemical proof what anatomy had long suggested. Dinosaurs are not gone. They have simply evolved. The birds outside your window are their living descendants, the echoes of that ancient lineage still beating beneath feathers and bone. But the wonder went deeper still. Proteins are fragile things, yet fragments survived within the fossil matrix, tiny curls of amino acids twisted like the remains of a melody. When scientists compared them to modern animals, they found matches, alignments, familiar notes in a song thought long forgotten. This was molecular time travel, the Earth itself serving as the archive. Each discovery raised new questions. How could such fragile material survive so long? What strange alchemy of burial and chemistry had sealed these tissues from decay? The bones of B. rex had been entombed in sandstone, flooded and dried, subjected to mineral-rich groundwater conditions that against all odds created a microenvironment where proteins resisted complete breakdown. Iron from the blood may have acted as a preservative, forming molecular crosslinks that locked the tissues in place. The same element that once carried oxygen through the dinosaur's body might have been the key to its eternal endurance. In that sense, the T-Rex became its own conservator. Its blood, symbol of vitality, also became the reason its flesh did not entirely fade. Under scanning electron microscopes, the ancient structures shimmered like threads of silk. There were hollow tubes where blood once flowed, delicate networks that once nourished a living body, weighing several tons. To see them magnified was to witness the impossible, the very architecture of life, caught mid-transformation between biology and geology. And what stories those molecules began to tell. Collagen patterns hinted at strength and flexibility, at the immense tension of muscles once attached to these bones. Chemical analyses suggested the dinosaur's body may have maintained a relatively warm internal temperature, more like a bird or mammal than a reptile. The balance of isotopes whispered of metabolism, of blood that ran fast, of energy that burned bright. Even the color of the skin, once only imagined in scales of grey or green, began to take shape through comparison with modern analogues. If these proteins carried pigment residues, they might tell us what shade the tyrant lizard wore when it stalked the late Cretaceous dusk. We used to see fossils as final things, the punctuation marks at the end of life's long sentences, but this discovery blurred that certainty. Fossils were no longer just stone. They were part memory, part matter, still humming faintly with information. Through molecular analysis, we were reading biology in deep time, decoding a genome written, not in ink, but in mineral echoes. There's something almost mythic about that idea that in the marrow of the earth, in the stillness of rock, the signature of life endures, that the same molecule that lets our own hearts beat and our muscles stretch has survived from an animal that thundered across prehistoric plains. It makes time itself feel porous, as though past and present were merely two sides of the same living fabric. And yet, science meets poetry at the edge of caution. The discovery of soft tissue does not mean resurrection. Despite the excitement of the idea, DNA, that fragile spiral of life, decays far too quickly to survive intact for millions of years. What remains in fossils like B. rex are fragments, whispers, partial melodies of proteins and structures, enough to recognize, to compare, to learn, but not enough to rebuild. The dream of a living dinosaur remains fiction, but the truth in its quiet way is more profound, because this fragment of collagen, this wisp of tissue, is not about reanimation. It is about continuity. When you look through a microscope at the cross-section of that tissue, you are not seeing death. You are seeing persistence. The same materials that make up your own body, the same amino acids, the same biological scaffolding, are there, echoing across an unimaginable gulf of time. It's as if the earth itself refused to let go of that heartbeat, holding it close, letting it hum beneath the weight of ages until someone somewhere would come listening. In that way, the discovery of soft tissue turned paleontology into something new, a science of intimacy. It's no longer enough to reconstruct skeletons. Now we trace molecules, measure bonds, read the fingerprints of ancient chemistry. We no longer imagine dinosaurs as distant legends. We feel them, molecule to molecule, as part of the same lineage of life that still beats within us. The ancient heart of Tyrannosaurus rex may not throb anymore, but its story does. From its preserved vessels, we glimpse not just the anatomy of a monster, but the poetry of endurance. The idea that even the mightiest fall, yet leave behind threads of themselves woven into the Earth's fabric. The proteins in our bodies are not so different, constantly rebuilt, decaying and reforming. Perhaps millions of years from now, they too will whisper to some future scientist, "We were here, we lived, we did not vanish completely." Imagine for a moment the living creature again, its lungs filling with hot air, its muscles stretching under the pull of bone and tendon, its blood surging with iron-red oxygen. Now imagine that same body fossilized, its tissues replaced and sealed, the pulse gone but the structure intact. It is almost as if time itself has two rhythms, the quick beat of life and the slow beat of preservation. When they overlap, you get something like B-Rex, a convergence of mortality and eternity. In the glow of the lab, under sterile light, the ancient vessels gleam faintly. Scientists handle them with reverence, as though afraid to disturb the spell. They extract what they can, measure what they must, but beneath every calculation lies a kind of wonder. The Tyrannosaurus rex, the terror of its time, has become fragile again, reduced to fibers thinner than a hair, trembling under the breath of air conditioning. It is both powerful and delicate, ferocious and vulnerable, the great circle of existence condensed into one specimen. Somewhere in that mix of dust and protein, of bone and ghost, there is the trace of a heartbeat that once shook the ground. And perhaps, if you listen closely, not with ears, but with imagination, you can almost hear it. Slow, heavy, steady. Not the beating of something alive, but the echo of life itself. Still resonant through time. The Earth, after all, remembers differently than we do. It doesn't keep photographs or stories. It keeps texture, molecule, vibration. When it finds something worth keeping, it holds it tight, even if it takes millions of years to reveal it again. So when we say Tyrannosaurus rex, we are not only naming a creature of the past, we are invoking a continuity of biology, a line that stretches from that ancient pulse to ours. The same chemistry, the same architecture of flesh and blood, written in the same alphabet of life. Once, that great heart pumped through a living empire of tooth and roar. Now it beats invisibly, softly, in the shared code of all that came after. The rock has turned cold, the vessels are brittle, the proteins are faint, but the message remains. I am still here, the Earth seems to whisper through the fossil, and so are you. A Tyrannosaurus rex once thundered across the plains of Montana. Its blood carried the same iron that now runs through ours. Its bones cradled the same proteins that shape our skin, and somewhere, deep within the silence of stone, its heartbeat never truly stopped, only slowed, folded, and waited to be found again. The king of the ancient world rests not as dust, but as memory, preserved not in myth, but in molecules. The ancient heart still beats, just very, very slowly. 375 million years ago, long before the first birds sang or the first forest swayed, the earth was still half dreaming its continents into being. The air above the water shimmered with heat, thick and raw, while below the surface, rivers and deltas teemed with life in its grand rehearsal, fins flickering, gills pulsing, creatures testing the limits of what alive could mean. And there, in the shallow streams of what would one day become the Arctic plains of Canada, something extraordinary moved. It was a fish almost, but not quite. Its name, given by those who later uncovered its stone remains, is Tiktaalik. In the Inuktitut language, it means burbot, a kind of fish. Fitting and yet ironic, because Tiktaalik was not only a fish, it was a pioneer, a bridge, a bold experiment of nature's imagination, caught halfway between water and land. Picture it about 9 feet long, armored in overlapping scales, with the sinuous grace of a predator. But look closer, the details begin to shift. Its head is flattened, its eyes set high on top, watching both the water above and the air beyond. Its neck, yes, a neck, unheard of in fish, can pivot side to side. Its fins, thick and muscular, hide something astonishing. Bones arranged not like the simple rods of a swimmer, but like the beginnings of wrists, elbows, and fingers. Tiktaalik was not walking yet, but it was thinking about it. Imagine it basking near the shallows, where the ancient rivers met the swampy edges of a primeval world. The water is warm, oxygen scarce, the surface glimmering with insects the size of leaves. In that unstable environment, a creature that can lift itself up, even slightly, gains an advantage to gulp air, to hunt in the shallows, to escape predators in deeper water. Evolution rarely plans ahead, but it rewards possibility. And Tiktaalik was possibility made flesh. When it pushed itself up with its strong, jointed fins, it did more than shift its body. It tilted the future. It was the moment the universe leaned toward the shore. In the fossil record, Tiktaalik appears like a hinge in time, a creature that belongs to two worlds at once. Its gills and fins say fish, its ribs, neck and proto-limbs whisper amphibian. For centuries, scientists had imagined there must have been such a transitional form, a bridge between fish and the first four-legged land dwellers, the tetrapods. But until Tiktaalik was found in 2004, that bridge had been hypothetical, a missing verse in life's long song. And then, on an ancient riverbed of Ellesmere Island, the earth exhaled the answer. The rocks there date back to the late Devonian period, when the world's climate was hot and humid, and shallow waterways covered much of what is now the Arctic. The scientists who dug through those layers, Neil Shubin, Ted Deichler, and Farish Jenkins, were searching precisely for this kind of creature. They knew the right age, the right environment, the right hint of mystery. What they didn't know was that they were about to meet one of the most eloquent storytellers evolution ever produced. When Tiktaalik's skull emerged from the stone, it looked like a fish's head at first, broad, scaled, ancient. But then came the neck vertebrae, separate and mobile. No fish had that. Then the shoulder bones detached from the skull, allowing the head to turn freely, and beneath the fins, not mere paddles but full of joints, bones, and even the primitive shapes of wrists. Inside those fins were the same basic elements found in every arm, every leg, every human hand that would one day sketch its portrait. Humerus, radius, ulna. It is a moment of eerie connection, realizing that the bones in your own hand, flexing as you turn a page or cradle a cup, first found their form in the fins of Tiktaalik. The blueprint of your wrist was drafted in that shallow river 305 million years ago. You carry the memory of that movement in your very anatomy. Science can describe these details in clear language: adaptive features, skeletal transitions, morphological intermediates, but words alone cannot capture the quiet astonishment of that lineage. It's as if the earth herself was whispering, "Crawl forward, try something new." Tiktaalik obeyed. Its world was a place of extremes, periodic droughts, rising and falling tides, murky deltas where water and land intertwined. In such an environment, a creature that could breathe both air and water, that could push itself up and move between pools, was king. Tiktaalik's ribs were broad, suggesting lungs strong enough to gulp air. Its flat head and upward-facing eyes showed that it watched the world above the surface. Its neck gave it freedom to look, to choose, to act with a kind of autonomy no fish had known before. It was a creature on the brink of imagination. When scientists reconstructed its skeleton, they realized Tiktaalik could prop itself up on its fins, its chest lifted above the mud. It may have ambushed prey from the shallows or hunted stranded fish in drying pools. Its movements were awkward, a blend of swimming and crawling, but effective, a prototype of locomotion that would one day evolve into strides, steps, and sprints. Each push of its fins against the soft mud was an experiment in gravity. Each breath of air was an act of invention. And though it could never have known, every mammal, bird, reptile, and amphibian that would ever walk the earth owed it a debt. Tiktaalik didn't leave the water for ambition. It left because survival asked for innovation. But in doing so, it opened the door to everything that would follow: forests, insects, footprints that would one day lead to us. From a scientific standpoint, Tiktaalik is one of the most crucial fossils ever found. It fills the evolutionary gap between lobe-finned fish and the earliest four-limbed vertebrates. Its discovery confirmed that the transition from water to land wasn't a sudden leap, but a slow series of experiments, each generation testing new possibilities. Its bones are the script of that transition, a record of evolution's patient creativity. And yet, beyond its anatomy, Tiktaalik stirs something emotional. There is something deeply human about that moment. A creature gazing at a world it does not yet belong to, reaching out awkwardly, bravely toward it. The gesture itself feels familiar, curiosity outweighing comfort. Perhaps that is why Tiktaalik captivates us so much. It's not merely the missing link, a sterile label for a fossil that connects one lineage to another. It's a story about courage, about the first step, however clumsy, toward change. The Devonian waters where it lived were shallow, unpredictable, full of silt and shadow. But above that surface lay air, light, new possibilities. Tiktaalik's life was a dialogue between safety and risk, between the known and the unknown, a dialogue that life has repeated ever since. In its preserved bones, we can almost feel that tension, the fins strong enough to lift, but not quite to walk, the lungs formed enough to breathe, but not for long, the neck able to turn toward the shore, but not to explore it fully. It lived in the liminal space between being and becoming. Evolution is made of such in-betweens, and Tiktaalik is their poet laureate. Even in stone, it retains that sense of anticipation. When you look at its fossil, the flat skull and jointed fins seem to hover between two verbs, to swim and to walk. You can imagine it pausing at the edge of the shallows, gills flaring, eyes reflecting the strange shimmer of dry land. Maybe it lifted itself higher, tasted the air, and felt something unfamiliar stir, not thought, but instinct, the first flicker of terrestrial will. The earth, if it could speak, might have murmured softly then, "Come closer, there's more to see." And so Tiktaalik did, not in a single motion, not in a cinematic leap, but in generations of effort, in gradual transformations written in muscle and bone. From fins to limbs, from water to air, from weightlessness to gravity, the transition unfolded, and through it, life gained a new dimension. When paleontologists study Tiktaalik today, they see not just an animal, but a threshold. Its discovery resolved one of the great questions of biology. How did vertebrates conquer land? But it also opened a deeper question. Why does life never stop crossing boundaries? Perhaps because movement is in its nature, because the urge to reach beyond, to test the edges of the possible, is written into the very molecules of existence. Tiktaalik was not planning to become a land animal, yet its structure made that future inevitable. The architecture of its fins foretold forests, deserts, mountains. Within its bones lay the blueprint of every future footprint. And isn't that extraordinary? That the same gesture that once pushed a fin through mud would one day push a foot into sand, a hand into soil, a mind into the stars. Tiktaalik was the first whisper of that long ascent. When you stand on the edge of a lake and watch ripples meet the shore, you are seeing the same meeting place that birthed Tiktaalik's world, water folding into land, the old world brushing against the new. The pattern repeats itself endlessly, the tide rising and retreating, evolution pausing and proceeding, each moment a negotiation between the past and what might come next. And if you listen closely, you might still hear the echo of that ancient ripple, the sound of a fin pressing into mud, the soft exhalation of a creature discovering breath. Tiktaalik is long gone, of course. Its rivers have turned to stone, its world vanished beneath glaciers and time, but its story never ended. It continues in the bending of your wrist, in the turn of your head, in the way you step forward without quite knowing why. Every movement you make is a continuation of its first experiment. In the fossil record, it lies halfway between fish and tetrapod, but in the grander sense, it lies halfway between dream and reality, proof that life's imagination is boundless. Tiktaalik looked at the shore and saw something worth reaching for, and in that quiet act of lifting itself, ribs expanding, neck twisting, fins pressing against the mud, it began a journey that would one day walk, run, climb, dance, and gaze back in wonder at the sea it came from. The earth may have whispered, "Crawl up," but it was Tiktaalik that answered, "I will." And with that, the world changed forever. In the beginning, there were no trees, no flowers, no beasts, no breath. The earth was young, raw, and unrecognizable, a world of fire and stone beneath an alien sky. Oceans simmered in mineral-rich warmth, their surfaces wrapped in haze. Lightning cracked through thick clouds of methane and carbon dioxide, and volcanic plumes bled into the air, painting it red. There were no continents yet, only fragments. No birds, no eyes, no voices. And yet, somewhere in that quiet chaos, something happened. Something small, something that changed everything. The first spark of life arrived, not as a creature, but as a process. A chemistry that learned how to remember itself. Molecules linked, copied, folded, divided, and for the first time, the planet had something that could grow. It is almost impossible to imagine such beginnings. Life as we know it is made of patterns, but this was the first pattern, and though the creatures that followed, the forests, the fish, the giants of later ages, have long since come and gone, the trace of those earliest beings still endures. They left behind their signatures not in bone or shell, but in stone, layered, subtle, ancient beyond reckoning. They are called stromatolites, and they are the oldest storytellers the earth possesses. If you've ever seen one, a low, rounded mound of stone, rippled like frozen waves, you might not guess that it is the work of life. Yet within those layered domes lies the history of the planet's first architects, cyanobacteria, also known as blue-green algae, though they are not algae at all, they are bacteria, simple, single-celled, microscopic. But their influence was vast. Around 3.5 billion years ago, in what is now Western Australia, they began their long labour, trapped in shallow seas under a young sun. These microbes lived in thin mats, forming colonies that grew toward light. As they photosynthesized, they released oxygen, an invisible exhalation that would one day transform the entire atmosphere. Day after day, they layered themselves in film upon film, secreting sticky mucus that trapped silt and sediment, which hardened into stone. Over time, these layers grew into towers, domes and ridges, living mountains of slime and sunlight, breathing through water long before lungs existed. To stand before a stromatolite, even a fossilized one, is to stand before the first breath of the world. Each ripple, each band, is a calendar of microbial persistence, days upon days multiplied into millennia. These were not creatures that moved or hunted. They did not roar or bloom. They simply endured, converting sunlight into oxygen, molecule by molecule for billions of years. And that oxygen, that gentle, invisible gas, was the beginning of everything. The early Earth's atmosphere had been suffocating to anything we would now call life. It was heavy with methane, carbon dioxide and ammonia, with almost no free oxygen. But as cyanobacteria thrived, their photosynthesis began to alter the balance. At first, the oxygen they produced reacted with dissolved iron in the oceans, forming vast deposits of rust-red minerals, the banded iron formations that still streak ancient rocks today. But eventually, after countless ages, the iron ran out, and oxygen began to accumulate in the air itself. That event, known to science as the Great Oxidation, was both a creation and a catastrophe. For the microbes that produced oxygen, it was triumph. They had filled the planet with their breath. But for much of the other life that had evolved in a low-oxygen world, it was poison. The very gas that would one day sustain animals was, at first, a killer. Entire microbial ecosystems suffocated as oxygen flooded their habitats. The Earth, for the first time, underwent a global extinction, wrought not by asteroids or fire, but by photosynthesis. And yet, in that slow apocalypse, the world began to change. The sky turned blue. The air cleared. The ozone layer formed, shielding the surface from ultraviolet light. New chemical reactions became possible, paving the way for complex life. Without those ancient bacteria, there would have been no oxygen to breathe, no water in liquid form on the surface, no stable climate. They did not simply inhabit the earth, they remade it. It is humbling, even unsettling, to think that all the forests and creatures, the great ages of reptiles and mammals and humankind, were made possible by colonies of microscopic architects, by beings that never saw, never thought, but simply multiplied. In the fossil record, their memory remains as delicate textures and patterns, fossilized microbial mats, rippled like the imprint of waves, Stromatolites from Western Australia, the Pilbara region, are among the oldest evidence of life known, dating back 3.5 billion years. Each layer marks a community that lived, photosynthesized and died, replaced by the next. Together, they built a monument that survived time itself, the autobiography of the planet written in limestone and light. Even today, living stromatolites can still be found in a few places on Earth, in the shallow hypersaline bays of Shark Bay, in Australia, in the lagoons of the Bahamas, and in a few rare lakes. They are slower now, more fragile but still alive, a continuous thread back to the dawn of biology. When the wind moves over their waters, it feels as if the planet itself is remembering its youth. Scientists who study these fossils are, in a sense, archaeologists of time itself. They read the faint chemical traces, the molecular fossils, or biomarkers, left behind by ancient microbes. These include specific carbon isotopes, organic molecules that tell of photosynthesis and metabolism, even when no physical structure remains. Some rocks still contain remnants of lipids, the fatty molecules that made up microbial membranes, stable enough to survive billions of years. Through such molecular signatures, we can reconstruct how life began to transform not only itself, but the chemistry of the entire world. The question of how these microbes first emerged remains one of science's deepest mysteries. Did life arise in shallow tidal pools rich with sunlight and minerals, or in the dark hydrothermal vents of the ocean floor, where heat and chemistry conspired in secret? Did lightning, ultraviolet radiation and volcanic gases forge the first organic molecules, or did the seeds come from space carried on meteorites rich in carbon? We do not yet know. But whatever the answer, stromatolites are the first clear reply from life itself. We were here. In the structure of their fossils, you can see the logic of self-organization, the rhythm of replication, the first murmur of consciousness that is not mind but persistence. These organisms had no nervous system, no awareness, but they knew, in their own molecular way, how to survive, to use energy, to build, to reproduce. That instinct, the will to endure, is the root from which every later complexity grew. There is something almost spiritual in that realization. Life began not with thunder or miracles, but with the quiet patience of microbes gathering sunlight in the shallows. For billions of years, that was the only life Earth knew, an entire biosphere made of invisibility. And yet, in that invisibility, the foundation of everything was built. When we look up at the stars and wonder if life exists elsewhere, we are not really asking if there are creatures like us. We are asking if somewhere, in another ocean, another chemistry, another epoch, there are tiny architects making their own worlds breathable, if there are alien stromatolites building the first whispers of an atmosphere. Even the rocks that hold these fossils seem aware of their significance. They are heavy with age, crystalline with memory. Within them, the ancient bacterial films left microtextures so fine that microscopes can still trace them. The ridges where light struck, the pores where gases flowed, the faint shimmer of carbon compounds embedded like handwriting. When you look at them under polarized light, they glitter faintly, not with life, but with the memory of it. The deeper scientists dig, the older these traces become, and the closer we come to the question not just of how life began, but why it persisted. Because the early Earth was not welcoming, it was violent, unstable, bathed in radiation, yet life did not retreat. It adapted, it found niches, it evolved metabolism to use whatever energy it could find: sunlight, sulfur, iron, hydrogen. It learned to cooperate, to form colonies, to build ecosystems out of chaos. The planet gave it stone, and it built cathedrals of light. From those beginnings, everything followed: the rise of complex cells, the explosion of multicellular life, the first movement, the first thought, the first word. All of it owes a debt to the invisible labor of microbes that lived and died billions of times over, leaving behind only oxygen and stone. In a sense, the Earth we know, blue, breathable, alive, is itself their fossil. The very air in your lungs is their legacy. Every breath you take is borrowed from their gift. The nitrogen and oxygen that sustain you were sculpted by bacterial metabolisms so ancient that they predate mountains. If you were to stand beside the ancient stromatolites of the Pilbara, beneath the harsh Australian sun, you might see only rock, but if you could slow time enough to watch their formation, you would see layers building, millimeter by millimeter, each formed by countless cells dividing and rising toward the light. You would see life inventing architecture. You would see the beginning of time made visible. Perhaps the earth remembers those first voices still, when the wind moves over stone, when waves lap at the shore, when light reflects from the water's surface. Those are echoes of the planet's first conversation with itself. The fossil record of microbes is not grand or dramatic. It does not roar or glitter. It whispers, but that whisper is the origin of everything that came after. Before the forests, before the mountains, before the stars reflected in our eyes, there was a film of green across a shallow sea, breathing the planet into possibility. And if you listen carefully, beneath the noise of everything that followed, you can still hear it. The earth, patient and proud, murmuring softly through stone. Here it began. The earth remembers in layers. Beneath our feet, beneath the forests and cities and oceans of the present, lies a vast archive written not in ink, but in stone, and among those pages pressed into shale, curled in wood, turned to quartz, traced in leaves as thin as breath, lies the memory of weather. The earth does not forget its climates. It keeps them folded carefully into fossils of forests and rivers, waiting for someone patient enough to read. Fossils we often think belong to bones and creatures, but many of the most revealing belong instead to landscapes. A single leaf, a ring of wood, a grain of pollen can tell the story of warmth and cold, of rain and drought, of how the air once tasted and how the wind once moved. They are, in a sense, fossils of time itself, pieces of atmosphere preserved in matter. Take, for instance, a forest that once grew at the top of the world. 56 million years ago, near the end of the Paleocene epoch, the planet underwent one of its most extraordinary transformations, the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, or PET. It was a fever that gripped the world, carbon flooding into the atmosphere, oceans warming, ice vanishing, and the very balance of life shifting. The average global temperature soared by 5 to 8 degrees Celsius, and for a few tens of thousands of years, the Earth became a greenhouse. The Arctic, now locked in ice and darkness for much of the year, was then a land of rivers and rainforests. The fossils tell us so. Buried in the frozen cliffs of Svalbard and Ellesmere Island, far above the Arctic Circle, scientists have uncovered the remains of trees, not driftwood washed from distant lands, but upright trunks, roots still anchored in the ancient soil. Their growth rings, their cellulose ghosts, reveal a climate so warm that palms and dawn redwoods once grew there. Fossil leaves, preserved in exquisite detail, carry the outlines of magnolias, alders, and sycamores, plants we associate with the tropics, not the poles. And yet there they are, frozen beneath tundra, telling of a time when the Arctic was green. Imagine that world, a rainforest at the top of the planet. Summers without night, winters without frost, swamps thick with ferns, the air humid and heavy with scent, crocodiles basking on riverbanks, giant turtles drifting through the slow, warm channels of ancient rivers. The poles were not barren, they were lush, and every ring in those fossilized trunks, every vein in those leaves, recorded the rhythm of that impossible Eden. When scientists study these fossils, they are not simply cataloguing extinct trees, they are decoding climate. The spacing of growth rings in fossil wood reveals not just the passage of time, but the pace of growth. Wide rings for warm, wet years, narrow ones for cooler, drier spells. The ratio of oxygen isotopes locked in the cellulose tells the temperature of the water the trees once drank. The shape of fossil leaves, smooth or serrated, broad or narrow, is another language entirely. In modern plants, the margin of a leaf correlates with climate. Smooth-edged leaves dominate warm regions, while jagged edges prevail in the cold. By comparing the patterns in ancient leaves with modern analogues, scientists can reconstruct the temperature and rainfall of worlds long gone. Through these fragments, we learn that during the Permian, carbon levels spiked dramatically, perhaps from volcanic activity, perhaps from methane released from the seafloor. The Earth's carbon cycle spiraled into imbalance, and the result was a rapid warming that reshaped the biosphere. Forests spread toward the poles, weather patterns shifted, oceans became acidic, and yet life adapted, evolved, migrated, persisted. The fossil forests of the Arctic stand as both a testament to resilience and a warning of the planet's volatility. There is poetry in the idea that trees, more than any monument, record the moods of the world. Each ring is a heartbeat, each layer of wood a memory of sunlight and rain. Some of those rings now lie mineralized, their organic tissues replaced by silica or calcite, but the pattern remains. When you hold a slice of fossilized wood from that polar forest, you can still count the seasons. You can still see the rhythm of warmth and light pulsing through the ancient trunk. You are, in that moment, reading the diary of the Earth itself. And yet, the story of climate fossils reaches beyond trees. Tiny grains of pollen, trapped in sediment, tell of changing vegetation, and by extension, changing climate. Bubbles of air and amber or ice preserve samples of ancient atmospheres, miniature capsules of gas composition and humidity. Even the chemistry of shells and soil, the ratio of carbon and oxygen isotopes, acts as a thermometer for time. To the trained eye, these clues come together like verses in a vast, slow poem, a chronicle of shifting skies. When we reconstruct these ancient climates, we are not just looking backward, we are glimpsing the Earth's own range, its capacity for transformation. The Petiem is particularly haunting because it mirrors, in accelerated form, what we are doing to the planet now. The amount of carbon released then is comparable to the carbon we have begun releasing since the dawn of industry. But in the Petiem, that process unfolded over thousands of years. We are doing it in centuries. The fossils do not judge. They do not warn with words. They simply show us what was. And what was, it seems, was both beautiful and fragile. Imagine walking through that ancient Arctic forest. The air is heavy, sweet with decay and bloom. The light, filtered through a canopy of broad leaves, flickers like green water. Insects drone. The ground, soft with peat, glows with warmth even at the poles. There are no glaciers. The sky holds a faint golden haze, the breath of a planet running a fever. You press your hand to the bark of a dawn redwood, its texture damp and resinous. You are standing where one day there will be ice and silence. But for now, the Earth is young and restless. Then, with time, the fever breaks. The carbon fades from the sky, the forests withdraw, ice returns. The fossil record closes over the memory like a book. What remains are the impressions, the leaves pressed into clay, the trunks turned to stone, the pollen grains encased in silt. They lie waiting for us, for our instruments, for our curiosity, to read them again. The work of scientists who study these fossils is almost devotional. They take slices of petrified wood thinner than paper and examine them under polarized light, tracing the direction of ancient fibers, the density of cells. They dissolve tiny samples in acid to isolate isotopes. They catalog leaf shapes and measure the ratio of smooth to toothed edges. They are, in essence, listening to the Earth breathe across time. From these measurements, we can reconstruct not just numbers, degrees, rainfall, atmospheric parts per million, but sensations. We can know what the air felt like on the skin of a leaf 50 million years ago, what kind of light filtered through the canopy, what the rhythm of the seasons was like. The fossils reveal that the Arctic, during the Petiem, had summer days near 25 degrees Celsius, with winters rarely dipping below freezing. It rained often. The world smelled of soil and salt and resin. There is a strange humility in realizing that the planet has been both colder and hotter than anything we have ever experienced. The fossil forests of the Arctic remind us that change is the only constant, that climate has always been the artist of evolution. And yet, there is also a quiet warning in their story, because while life endured, it was reshaped. Ecosystems migrated, species vanished, oceans acidified. The Earth recovered, yes, but it was never the same again. The fossils speak in patient tones. They tell us that warmth brings growth, but also upheaval, that abundance can precede collapse, that every layer of soil, every mineralized trunk, every trapped atom of carbon is a sentence in a long dialogue between the living and the atmosphere. Even the texture of fossil wood carries emotion. Some samples are blackened with carbon, others opalized into iridescent hues. They shimmer like frozen sunlight, as if the trees themselves have been transformed into memory, and perhaps they have. When you hold one to the light, you can almost see the reflection of the ancient canopy, the play of sunlight through a world that is gone yet not forgotten. Fossil leaves, too, are miracles of preservation. The veins are intact, delicate as lace. Some even retain traces of pigment or cuticle texture. Under magnification, their pores, stomata, are visible. These are the microscopic mouths through which plants breathe. By counting them, scientists can estimate the concentration of carbon dioxide in the air at the time the leaf grew. High CO2, fewer stomata; low CO2, more. Thus, each leaf becomes a barometer of the ancient atmosphere, a direct record of the world's exhalations. It is staggering to think that a leaf, no larger than your palm, can tell us how the sky once behaved. Yet that is what fossils do. They make the invisible visible. In the end, climate fossils are more than relics of past worlds. They are mirrors. They show us the planet's resilience, but also its sensitivity. They remind us that the Earth is not static. It breathes, oscillates, sweats, and cools. It forgets and remembers, and it records with unerring precision every chemical sigh and solar whisper. When you visit a museum and stand before a slab of rock bearing fossil leaves, you are not just looking at plants. You are looking at weather turned to stone. You are looking at sunlight from a forgotten age, captured in cellulose and minerals. You are looking at the sky's autobiography. And perhaps, if you listen closely, you can still hear it, a soft murmur through the ages, as though the wind in the fossilized forest is trying to speak once more. The Earth, after all, is a storyteller. It keeps diaries in wood and stone. It writes with minerals, not ink. And its story is never static. It loops, spirals, changes tone. The fossil forests of the Arctic are one chapter in that great narrative, a chapter where warmth ruled, where rain fell on tundra, where crocodiles swam beneath midnight sun. One day the world cooled, the forest froze. But the story did not end, it merely waited, sleeping beneath ice, until human hands uncovered it again. And as we read it now, as we trace the patterns in fossil leaves and count the rings in petrified trees, we realize that we too are part of this diary. Our breath, our fires, our carbon are writing the next chapter. The planet will remember us, as it remembered them. The Earth whispers still, through the fossils of its climates. I have been hot before, I have been cold, I endure. But every change leaves its mark. And so the stones continue to tell their weathered story of forests that grew beneath the poles, of skies that burned with warmth, of a world that is, even now, turning its next page. The fossils whisper, if we know how to listen. Beneath the stillness of their forms, under the quiet gleam of stone, they tell a story not only of creatures that were, but of everything that can be lost, and everything that endures. To study them is to look into a mirror that reflects both mortality and persistence. It is to understand that life, as beautiful as it is, has always been fragile, a candle flickering in the wind of cosmic chance, and yet somehow it keeps burning. When we trace the layers of Earth's memory, we discover a truth both humbling and profound. Over 99.9% of all species that ever lived are gone. Every reef, every forest, every song once sung by living things has faded into silence. The trilobites that once carpeted the sea floor, the giant ferns that shadowed the carboniferous swamps, the herds that thundered across ancient plains, all of them are gone. Their stories are written in the stone beneath our feet, and the ink they used was time itself. And yet, the Earth is not empty. The silence is never total. Each extinction, each ending, has opened a space for new beginnings. Life, it seems, carries within itself an unbreakable instinct, not merely to survive, but to transform. That is the paradox the fossils teach us. Fragility and resilience, hand in hand. If we look deep into the fossil record, we find not just the beauty of vanished worlds, but the scars of catastrophe. 5 times in the planet's history, nearly everything living has been erased. The great volcanic convulsions that poisoned the Permian seas, the sudden cooling that froze continents, the asteroid that ended the reign of the dinosaurs. Each of these events could have been the final page of life's book. And yet, after every silence, a new song began. From the ashes of one world, another always rises. This is not to romanticize extinction, it is loss on a scale beyond comprehension. But it is also part of a larger rhythm, a pattern written into the very structure of existence. Change is not the enemy of life, it is its teacher. Every fossil is a lesson in adaptation, in how life bends without breaking, how it yields to catastrophe and then re-emerges reshaped. To hold a fossil is to touch the remains of something that once flourished, then fell, and yet, through its fall, allowed something else to grow. The Earth's creativity depends on its impermanence. Even the greatest disasters, the meteors, the floods, the fires, have not destroyed life's essence. They have only sculpted it. The meteor that fell 66 million years ago ended the age of giants, but it opened the sky to birds and the land to mammals, and eventually to us. Out of darkness, new light. Out of absence, new forms. The Earth has never stopped evolving, it simply changes its tune. When we read the fossil record, we are reminded of our own smallness. Humanity is a recent arrival, a flicker in the long night of geological time. Our civilizations, our histories, our empires, all of them fit into the tiniest sliver of the planet's timeline, the last breath of the last chapter. We are not the culmination of evolution. We are its newest experiment. And yet, like those who came before us, we are fragile. The same laws that sculpted the trilobite and the tyrannosaur apply to us. We too are bound by the planet's rhythms, the tilt of its axis, the pulse of its climate, the chemistry of its air. We are not apart from the story of extinction, we are inside it. The fossils show us both the cost of arrogance and the possibility of humility. For in their silence there is no judgment, only reflection. They do not warn us with thunder or prophecy. They simply are. They remind us that the Earth has continued for billions of years without us, that it will continue long after we are gone. And yet, in the same breath, they remind us of the astonishing resilience of life itself. How something so delicate can endure cosmic violence, planetary upheaval, and time's slow erosion. When you look at the fossils of the oldest organisms, the simplest imprints of ancient cells, and then think of the vastness of life that has followed, you begin to see the miracle not in survival, but in persistence. Life doesn't conquer the world by strength or by force. It does so by continuity, by its refusal to give up. It is like a flame that passes from one wick to another, never the same flame twice, but always burning. Even extinction, then, is part of that fire. It is tempting to see ourselves as separate from the fossils, as observers rather than participants. But the truth is otherwise. We are part of the same unfolding. Our bones will one day lie in the same archives. Our cities, our towers, our noise, all of it will turn to sediment. One day, perhaps, future beings will unearth traces of us, puzzled by the strange layer of our civilization, a thin band of carbon and glass, plastic and bone. They will see us not as we see ourselves, not as the pinnacle of progress, but as a moment, a chapter, a breath. And that too is part of the lesson. For all its fragility, life endures not through individuals or species, but through the persistence of change. The fossils show us that permanence is an illusion. Mountains rise and crumble. Oceans advance and retreat. Species bloom and vanish. Yet life, the process itself, continues. It is a kind of patience beyond understanding, a patience that stretches across billions of years, indifferent to disaster, faithful only to itself. There is a quiet comfort in this, to know that life is both fragile and eternal, that endings are not failures, but transitions, that even when the page turns, the story continues. The fossils remind us that survival is not the same as stillness. What endures is not the body, but the idea, the capacity to adapt, to transform, to begin again. Every extinction has been followed by an explosion of creativity, of new forms and possibilities. The Earth does not mourn the lost. It remembers them in the DNA of what follows. We too are written in that code. The cells that make us are ancient inventions, refined through every catastrophe that came before. Within us are molecules first forged in the oceans of the Archean, atoms once part of stars, patterns that have survived every extinction the Earth has known. We carry the entire fossil record within our blood, not as memory but as design. The lesson then is not despair but perspective. The fossils tell us that to exist at all is a miracle, that life is not guaranteed, that it has persisted through odds we can hardly imagine, through impact and fire, through freezing and flood, through darkness deep enough to erase worlds. It reminds us that fragility and resilience are not opposites. They are partners. It is because life is fragile that it learns to endure. It is because it breaks that it learns to mend. We might think of the earth as cruel for erasing so much, but perhaps it is more accurate to see it as a sculptor, reshaping, refining, endlessly remaking. Life is the chisel's mark upon stone. Each extinction, each transformation leaves a trace that shapes the next. If the fossils could speak plainly, perhaps they would not tell us to grieve or to fear, but to remember that we too are temporary, and that our strength lies not in permanence, but in connection to each other, to the planet, to the long river of existence that flows through us. When you stand before a fossil in a museum, you are looking not only at the past, but at yourself. You are the continuation of what it began. The same chemistry that built its bones builds yours. The same chance that shaped its fate shapes your own. The difference is only time, and time is not an enemy. It is the soil in which life grows. The fossils remind us to live gently, to recognize that the world we inherit is not ours alone, to understand that what survives us will not be our monuments, but the traces of our choices. They remind us that every species believes, for a moment, that it will last forever. The trilobite believed it. The dinosaur believed it. Perhaps we do too, but the earth knows otherwise. It teaches through loss and through renewal. The fossil record is not a graveyard. It is a testament to transformation, to adaptation, to the unkillable spark of life. It tells us that extinction is not the opposite of existence. It is part of it. It reminds us that we are both fragile and resilient, transient, yet participants in something vast and enduring. Perhaps the most profound message the fossils carry is simple: continue. No matter the asteroid, the volcano, the ice, continue. No matter the collapse, the silence, the void, continue. The earth has whispered this for billions of years, and life has obeyed. And so should we, because in the end, that is what it means to be alive, to be part of a story that never stops unfolding. The fossils are the punctuation, not the conclusion. We are the next sentence. The earth in its ancient patience says softly through the stones, "You are not the first, you will not be the last, but you are part of the song. Sing while you can." Someday, long after our cities have quieted and our names have dissolved into dust, the earth will open its next chapter. The continents will continue their slow drift, the seas will shift and rise, and new mountains will grow from the restless heart of the planet. Wind will grind steel to sand, coral will reclaim concrete, roots will weave through glass and stone, and in that distant age, someone or something may dig through the layers of time and find us. What will they see? Perhaps they will not find us at all. No bodies, no words, no monuments, but only the traces of what we were. The imprints of our era, pressed into rock and sediment, a line of metal and plastic, a shimmer of glass, a stain of carbon. Our roads and skyscrapers, our circuits and engines, all reduced to mineralized relics, layered beneath future worlds. These will be our fossils, the fossils of humankind. We have always studied the past through stone, but now, whether we realize it or not, we are writing our own geological story. The Anthropocene, scientists call it, the age of humans. It is not an official epoch yet, but it is already etched into the earth. Our presence is not just a moment in history, it is a stratum in geology. Every act, every invention, every footprint leaves its mark. In the deep time to come, our concrete cities will become limestone-like masses. Our metals will oxidize into veins of color through sediment. Our plastics will fuse with sand to form a new hybrid rock, plastiglomerate, a word born of our strange marriage to synthetic matter. The fossils of the future will not only be bones, they will be our creations, our excess, our architecture. Imagine, for a moment, a future paleontologist uncovering the remains of our world. Perhaps millions of years from now, beneath what used to be the Pacific, they find the outline of a bridge, its iron skeleton encased in crystallized salt. In another place, they find a thin layer of soot and microplastics marking the transition between two geological eras, a dark ribbon that tells of combustion, industry, and ambition. In the rocks of that faraway Earth, the traces of us will be unmistakable. There will be an anomaly of carbon isotopes from the fuels we burned, traces of nitrogen from fertilizers, spikes of radioactive elements from our experiments with the atom. There will be the residues of cities' concrete, glass, copper, silicon, each transformed by time into something unrecognizable yet enduring. We will have become a mineral memory. The bones of animals will tell the rest. Already, climate change reshapes their chemistry, altering the oxygen and carbon ratios in their skeletons, rewriting the record of their lives before they have even fossilized. Coral skeletons form thinner, shells grow more fragile. Polar bears' bones may one day lie far from ice. If the fossils of tomorrow are the diaries of today, then they are already writing of heat. There will be fingerprints of extinction too. The layers of the Anthropocene will hold ghost species, bones of creatures that did not survive our age. Amphibians silenced by disease, birds whose songs ended with the forests, mammals that vanished beneath our expansion. The sediment will record their absence as faithfully as it records our presence. Yet, not all of our traces will be grief. Alongside the scars, there will be evidence of care, reforested valleys, wetlands reborn, species restored. The fossil record of the future might remember that too. The seeds we saved, the rivers we cleaned, the lands we allowed to breathe again. For the first time in the planet's long story, one species has become aware of its own geological shadow. We can see, with startling clarity, the layer we are leaving behind. Every skyscraper, every road, every fragment of plastic drifting in the sea is part of the next archive. We are not just inhabitants of Earth. We are authors of its next epoch. It is a strange position, both powerful and fragile. The dinosaurs never knew they were leaving fossils. The forests of the Carboniferous never imagined they would become coal. But we do. We know that our legacy will harden into stone. We know the weight of our impact, and that knowledge gives us a choice. What kind of fossils will we leave? If a future geologist, or perhaps a being we cannot imagine, were to peel back the layers of the 21st century, what story would they read? Would they find the signatures of collapse, a thin dark line of extinction and heat? Or would they find the marks of restraint, of wisdom, of a species that learned at last to live in harmony with its planet? Perhaps they will find both. Because humanity, like the fossils before us, is not one thing. We are contradictions, destructive and creative, reckless and compassionate, capable of ruin and of renewal. Our rocks will tell both tales, of pollution and of preservation, of harm and of healing. Even now, the earth records us. Beneath deserts, beneath oceans, beneath frozen tundra, our era is already being written in layers, strata rich with synthetic compounds, microplastics, the soot of cities, the carbon of our breath. The planet does not forget. It will carry our story for millions of years, long after the last human word fades. And in that far future, the stones will speak of us, the way we now speak of ammonites and ferns. They will whisper, here was a species that built with fire. Here was one that walked upright and dreamed of stars. Here was one that burned and rebuilt and wondered. Perhaps that is the true wonder of fossils. They are not only about endings, but about translation. They turn experience into matter, time into memory. Our fossils, too, will be translations of who we were, what we made, what we valued. Even now, our legacy grows in the soil. The bones of cattle and sheep, the shells of mollusks we have farmed, the forests we have altered, all carry our touch. Future strata will hold traces of our agriculture, our diets, our chemistry. Some of our own bones will join them. Mingled with the animals and artifacts of our time, the earth does not discriminate, it buries all equally. And then perhaps, far away from where we began, new life will emerge. It will find our fossils and wonder. It will trace our carbon and see the sudden spike of warmth. It will read our layer and find both beauty and warning. It will know that we once lived, and that we loved, and that we changed the face of the world. There is a quiet irony here. For billions of years, fossils have been the planet's way of remembering. Now we have become the memory itself, and that awareness of our permanence through impermanence should make us humble. We like to think of legacy as monuments, as grand achievements, carved in marble or written in history books. But the true legacy of a species is the mark it leaves on the planet's breath. The forests it nurtures or destroys, the rivers it clears or clouds, the balance it keeps or breaks. Our fossils will not be measured in statues, but in sediment. Not in fame, but in chemistry. The story we leave will not be told in words, but in atoms arranged by the slow hand of time. So perhaps the question is not whether we will leave fossils, we will, but what they will say. Will they tell of a species that consumed without end, that turned its oceans to acid and its sky to ash? Or will they tell of a turning, a moment when we looked into the mirror of deep time and chose to live differently? Will they say that we listened to the planet's quiet plea to slow down, to breathe, to protect? The choice, uniquely, is ours. We stand at the edge of two eternities, the deep past beneath us and the deep future ahead, and for the first time, we can see both. We can see the fossils that brought us here, the long patience of evolution, the endurance of life, and we can see the faint outline of our own stratum forming beneath our feet. To protect the ecosystems that sustain us, to restore the forests and oceans that give us breath, is to shape not only the present, but the future fossil record itself. It is to decide what kind of world the Earth will remember, because one day, millions of years from now, the dust of our cities will settle into rock. The air we alter will become trapped in bubbles of ice or sediment. The species we save or fail to save will mark our layer. The climate we create will write our epitaph in stone. And when the Earth whispers to the future, it will say, "This was the age of humans." It might speak of our mistakes, our noise, our excess, but perhaps too it will speak of our tenderness, the way we tried to heal what we had broken, the way we began to see ourselves not as masters of the planet, but as its memory keepers. Because in the end, every fossil is a promise that something of us will remain, and that the story of life, of struggle and resilience and wonder, will continue. So when the Earth asks, what will you leave behind? Let our answer be more than plastic and smoke. Let it be forests. Let it be coral. Let it be balance. Let it be. We may not control the future, but we can decide the shape of our layer in the great book of time. And if someday, far beyond us, a new mind uncovers our fossils and listens closely, may the Earth still be able to whisper through the stones we leave. They remembered that they belonged to me. They tried to keep the world alive, and that perhaps will be the most enduring fossil of all. The story of Earth is not finished. It is still being written, slowly, delicately, letter by letter, beneath layers of stone and silence. Every fossil we have ever found is just one word in that immense and ancient book, and still there are pages unturned, pages buried beneath deserts, beneath glaciers, beneath the dark weight of the sea. The planet keeps its secrets well. It hides them in salt and clay, in volcanic ash and limestone, in the shadows of canyons and the floors of forgotten oceans. But every so often the wind shifts, the tide recedes, the rock cracks, and a new story surfaces, a fossil, a trace, a whisper of life that no one has ever seen before. Each discovery, no matter how small, feels like hearing the earth breathe for the first time again. Somewhere in the Sahara, a paleontologist kneels in the heat, brushing away grains of sand. The horizon shimmers, the air hums with heat, and suddenly, there it is, the curve of a bone, the imprint of a scale, the hint of something that should not have survived. A few thousand miles away, deep beneath the Antarctic ice, cores of sediment are pulled from the frozen seabed, revealing pollen from forests that once grew where now there is only silence. And far below the waves of the Pacific, Robotic arms of submersible explorers scoop up layers of mud untouched for tens of millions of years, finding microscopic fossils of creatures that thrived in darkness. Everywhere, the planet is whispering, "Keep looking." Each discovery adds a new chapter, sometimes rewriting entire volumes of what we thought we knew. A fossil unearthed in the desert may show that life spread earlier than imagined. A tiny bone in a cave might reveal that a species once believed extinct walked the Earth far longer than we thought. A fragment of shell can shift our understanding of climate, showing that the oceans once breathed differently, that the chemistry of life was not fixed but fluid. Science, at its heart, is an act of humility, the acknowledgement that the story is incomplete. When paleontologists find something new, the first feeling is not triumph but awe. How many millennia did this remain hidden? How many floods, fires, and storms passed above it? How many times did the Earth turn before a human hand brushed it free? Each fossil uncovered feels both miraculous and inevitable, as if time itself had been waiting for that moment, as if the stone had been holding its breath. And the most wondrous thing is that these discoveries are not slowing down, they are multiplying. In deserts, once thought barren, scientists have found bones of ancient whales, reminders that seas once covered the land. In the depths of oceans, under pressure so immense it crushes steel, microfossils record the rise and fall of entire ecosystems. In tropical caves, under layers of bat guano and centuries of dust, traces of extinct mammals and birds continue to emerge. Even in the most desolate stretches of Antarctica, under ice older than civilization itself, there are fossils of forests, of leaves, of roots that once drank sunlight from a temperate sky. Each one adds another verse to the song of life. These discoveries do not simply fill in gaps, they expand the map of what is possible. The fossil record, once thought to be a static archive, has become a living dialogue, an evolving conversation between the Earth and those who listen. New technologies allow us to read that dialogue in ever greater detail. CT scans revealing the interiors of fossils without breaking them, isotopic analysis, tracing ancient climates from a single tooth, DNA fragments recovered from permafrost, carrying echoes of vanished genomes. Through these methods, science peels back the layers of mystery, one atom at a time. Yet, for all our tools and equations, there is still something almost mystical about the act of discovery. To find a fossil is to meet time itself, to touch what should be untouchable. It is a kind of communion between the living and the dead, between the now and the forever. And every time we think the story is complete, the Earth surprises us. In 1 year, a fossilized skeleton discovered in an unexpected layer reveals that certain mammals evolved earlier than we imagined. The next year, a new marine species found in the depths of an ancient seabed changes our understanding of how ecosystems recover after extinction. In the next, a perfectly preserved insect in amber opens a window into behavior, a snapshot of motion and instinct, frozen mid-flight for millions of years. Each time, science must pause and rewrite its conclusions. The fossils are not static relics. They are participants in a conversation that stretches across epochs. And what do they tell us? They tell us that life is far more creative than we dare to dream, that evolution is not a straight line, but a tapestry woven of experiments, successes, failures, and surprises, that even the smallest creature can change the course of the world. Every new fossil forces us to reconsider what life is capable of. A fish with limbs, a reptile with feathers, a mammal with wings. Each discovery reminds us that nature is never finished with its imagination. Even now, in the age of satellites and algorithms, we are still explorers of mystery, still chasing echoes of what came before. The deserts, the oceans, the mountains, all are libraries still being opened. The sand dunes shift and reveal bones of animals that lived when those same dunes were seabeds. The ocean floor heaves and cracks, exposing fossils that predate continents. The mountains, rising from ancient sea layers, hold within them the remains of coral reefs, ammonites, and creatures that once knew sunlight through water. Everywhere, the past waits, and there is wonder in knowing that we have not reached the end of it. There are still creatures we have not met, still worlds we have not imagined, still entire chapters of evolution hidden beneath our feet. For every fossil displayed in a museum, thousands more remain undiscovered, some crushed beneath tectonic plates, some lying undisturbed in forgotten riverbeds, some dissolved but not yet erased. Each discovery deepens our understanding, not only of life but of time itself. Fossils reveal that time is not a straight road, but a looping river, carrying traces of what came before into what exists now. When scientists uncover a new fossil, they do not simply add a data point, they uncover another thread connecting all life together. Even the smallest fragment, a tooth, a scale, a print of skin, can alter the grand story. From a single bone we can infer diet, motion, behavior, even climate. From a single layer of sediment, we can reconstruct entire ecosystems. The Earth writes its autobiography in fragments, and it is our task to read between the lines. The more we find, the more we realize how much we do not yet know. Each fossil uncovered raises new questions. Why did this creature thrive when others perished? How did this ecosystem adapt to shifting climates? What chain of chance led from this ancient form to the life we see today? The deeper we dig, the more intricate the answers become. There is a strange kind of optimism in that, in the endlessness of discovery, because to explore the unknown is to affirm that mystery still exists, that we have not yet reached the limits of wonder. When paleontologists brush away the dust from a fossil surface, they are not only unveiling the past, they are expanding the present. Every discovery widens our imagination, showing us what life has already accomplished and hinting at what it may still do. And perhaps that is the greatest truth fossils reveal, that the Earth is still unfolding, still writing, still alive in its storytelling. The record of life is not a completed volume resting on a shelf. It is a manuscript in progress, written across billions of years, with new chapters still being drafted under our feet. The deserts hold their secrets in silence. The oceans cradle them in darkness. The mountains guard them in stone. But one by one, they are speaking. Somewhere, right now, a fossil is waiting. A shape in the rock, a curve beneath the soil, a secret that could change everything we think we know. It may be the footprint of an animal that never reached the textbooks, or a plant that once flourished in a forgotten climate. It may be microscopic, barely visible, but in its pattern lies a revelation. Each fossil is not just a relic, it is a message, carried across eons. It says there is more to know. Keep looking, and that is what scientists do, not out of greed for knowledge, but out of reverence. They listen to the quiet voices of the rocks, to the faint whispers beneath the sand. They know that each new discovery is a page added to a story that belongs not only to science but to humanity, to our collective curiosity, our longing to understand where we came from and what we are part of. The story of the Earth has no final chapter. It is a living book, one that continues to grow with every fossil found, every theory tested, every question asked. And like all great stories, it is both ancient and new, a tale of change, of resilience, of wonder. So we keep searching, through the glare of the desert sun, through the cold dark of the sea, through the dust of forgotten cliffs. Because somewhere out there, the Earth has hidden the next line, the next paragraph, the next revelation. And when we find it, when the rock splits and the past emerges into light, we will listen, as we always have, for what it says. The Earth will whisper, as it has since the beginning. You've read much, but not all. Keep turning the pages, and we will, because the story, our story, the planet's story, is still being written, one fossil at a time. And now, as the night deepens and the world around you softens into quiet, we return to the beginning, to the gentle hum beneath all these stories. We have traveled far together, across millions of years and oceans of silence. We've listened to the frozen hunters, locked in eternal struggle, the unborn sleeping in their ancient eggs, the tiny microbes that painted the first breath of air. We've wandered through forests that grew where ice now reigns, and we felt the pulse of life itself echo through bones, shells, and stone. And through it all, one message has whispered to us again and again, that life, in all its fragility, is endlessly resilient. It changes form, it transforms itself, but it never truly ends. It pauses, it adapts, it waits for the right moment. And then, with the patience of the Earth itself, it rises again. Every fossil we've met has been a memory, a shimmer of sunlight caught in rock, a breath turned to crystal. They remind us that existence is both fleeting and eternal, that what perishes also persists, that the earth remembers every heartbeat that ever touched it. If you hold a fossil up to the light, it glimmers faintly, not just from minerals, but from meaning. In that gleam is the trace of time's long lullaby, sung across billions of years. You are part of this too. The hunters, the embryos, the trilobites, the ancient forests, the smallest bacteria, all of them, in their own ways, are our ancestors. They are the syllables from which we were spoken, and if you listen closely enough, you can still hear them, the gentle chorus of the past, humming softly beneath the surface of the world. It says, "You belong to the same breath, the same dust, the same wonder." So now as you rest, imagine those fossils glowing faintly beneath the earth, a constellation underground, each one a star of stone, telling the story of life's persistence. Let that image drift behind your eyes as you fall into sleep, the shining bones, the curled embryos, the ghostly leaves, all of them resting, patient, beautiful, the earth's dreams, waiting for morning. And as you breathe, slowly and deeply, remember that you too are part of that great and unbroken line. One day, long from now, the trace of your life will join theirs, perhaps not as stone, but as influence, as kindness, as memory. So sleep now, dear traveller of time. Let the fossils keep their vigil. Let the ancient stones hum their quiet hymn. The earth whispers through the deep and through the dark. Rest now, the story continues. And as the last echoes fade, let yourself drift, carried gently by that endless song of survival, of patience, of wonder. If these stories have warmed you, let them linger. Share them, so they may travel farther, like echoes across ages, like starlight through dust. And when you close your eyes tonight, may you dream not of endings, but of continuations, of oceans returning, of forests growing, of time unfolding like a soft breath. Because even in sleep, you are part of the earth's remembering. Good night. May the fossils sing you softly to dream.